So I will share that link out with you after we finish. But today we are so pleased to have Christina Noel and Jenni Redifer here to talk to us about myth busting of all the things that we hear our students say and things that we say about learning and the learning process. So I think this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for us to think about the way that we are approaching our classes. And I look forward to hearing from you both. So I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you. I'm Jenni Redifer, and Christina Noel is my co-presenter. So I'm from the Department of Psychology, and Christina is from the School of Teacher Education. And so we're going to give you kind of our two perspectives on this issue.
All right, fantastic. So we have 4 goals for you guys today. The first one is we want you to be able to understand the most common misconceptions students have about learning. And then we want you to be able to know how to correct your students' misconceptions by providing them with accurate information. And then we want you to be able to recognize unproductive behavior that might stem from these misconceptions that we're going to talk about today. And then finally, of course, we want to provide you with strategies and resources so that you can help your students change unproductive behaviors.
So before we can get into the myths, we should talk a little bit about just how we know what we know about how people learn. And so the science of learning involves systematically evaluating all kinds of different factors that impact retaining knowledge, gaining knowledge in the first place, and transfer of that knowledge to other settings, which is often what we want our students to be able to do. And so there are certainly situational factors that impact this, and there are individual differences among your students that impact their learning, but they may not be the individual differences that you've most commonly heard students talk about. Sometimes the research findings get taken too far. So sometimes maybe there is a finding. So for example, we know that over time, exercise benefits cognition, but that doesn't mean that running right before a test is going to improve your performance. But what we're going to talk about today is more about things that students believe that are not supported by scientific evidence and how those things might be harmful to their learning, and then what you can do about those things. So we know that from the science of studying misconceptions that it's important to warn people if you're about to show them information that is inaccurate. So this is your warning. The things on the next slide are myths. They are things that students believe that are not actually true. So these are 3 commonly held beliefs about student learning that are not based in science, meaning that there's no evidence to support them. And in fact, there's actually evidence that pretty clearly refutes these ideas. The first one is that there are learning styles and that students fit into one. The second myth we're going to talk about is that some students are just not good at online learning. And then finally, we're going to talk about the idea of multitasking, something that we all try to do, but that we are not actually good at doing.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about this first one. The first misconception we're going to address is probably one you guys have all heard about in one form or another. So the idea is that people fit into one of 3 learning styles. And when instruction aligns with your personal learning style, then your learning is maximized. I think we can all agree that that notion in and of itself is not necessarily harmful, but when you take it to its logical end, you'll see how this can be harmful for your students. So this idea is if you fit into a learning style, then your learning is maximized. And what we often hear from students is that if the instruction is not in their learning style, then they cannot learn, right? They cannot learn the content that you're teaching them because you are not teaching them within their learning style. And so I think you guys can see how this might actually be harmful for students. The 3 learning styles that this theory addresses are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. I'm not going to spend any time talking about them because they are myths. But I do at least want you maybe have heard the term learning style. You maybe have heard students say, I'm an auditory learner, or I'm a visual learner, or I'm a kinesthetic learner. that's all, this is where this is coming from, this learning style. So I at least wanted to present that to you. So if you heard those as buzzwords, you would know what your students are talking about. All right. So here are some things that we do know about learning styles that we're going to kind of reframe it a little bit for you. So one thing that we do know that might relate in some way, and this might be why this particular theory has gained so much traction. It's something that I hear very consistently in my classes, is that we know that individuals perform better when teachers use a variety of modalities to teach. So you can think of them as auditory, visual, or kinesthetic, although I prefer not to because I hate to just perpetuate that myth, right? So I use different words when I'm thinking about the different modalities in which I teach. But we do know that some of the content that you might cover might be better taught using a traditional lecture style, like a sit and get type style, whereas other content might require hands-on or an interactive approach. It's highly unlikely that all of the content that you guys teach would kind of fit really well within one format, right? So that's potentially one thing that is coming from this learning styles, is that we know that teachers do better when they teach with multiple strategies and multiple modalities. Again, though, we want to make sure that it's clear that we do not want you to, oh, that is so red and very blurry. So this is, yeah, don't do this.
Blurry? That's weird. It's not blurry on my end. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. Maybe it's not blurry for anyone else. Maybe I need glasses. But we just want you to know that if you are trying to match the way that you teach to a student's learning style, you're unlikely to be successful for that student, okay? So let's talk about why it matters. Here's some of the things that we worry about if we perpetuate this debunked theory. So first, it can impact motivation. Second, it may prevent students from actually addressing what might be causing them to struggle in your class. So we find that instead of like this amorphous issue of I'm a visual learner, that real reasons actually are the reasons why students are struggling in class. So by real reasons, I mean, maybe they have ineffective study skills. Maybe they have poor class attendance. Maybe they're lacking some of the prerequisite knowledge that they really need to be bringing into class. And so those are really much more important to address than to think about, oh, I've got to try to teach this in a visual modality because that's my students' learning styles, right? Third, of course, we want students to take ownership of their learning. They are college students, they are graduate students, and so we want them very much to take ownership. And kind of perpetuating learning styles can actually rob them of this ownership, right? It's, you're failing or succeeding at something because of these forces that are outside of your control, right? Because the professor doesn't teach to your learning style. So we see that as potentially harmful. And then finally, I mentioned it a little bit, but if you try to teach to a specific style, it might not be what is actually necessary for your content. So if you are, teaching about dissecting an eyeball, right? You might actually need your students in your lab to sit down and dissect an eyeball. If you're teaching, and that would be more of a hands-on approach, right? So it's not going to be as meaningful to hear me talking about it as it is to do it. And so you all can think about the content that you teach and think about, oh, there are better ways and worse ways to teach the content, and not necessarily better or worse ways to teach to students. That makes sense. So let's see how this might work in your classroom. And how many people are on this call? 18. Okay. If you have not heard this, then I will pay you $10. And I am guaranteeing that I am not paying $10 today. Okay. So some form or another of Joel has happened in your class. I really will pay you $10. So send me a chat if this has not happened. Okay. Joel comes up to me after class and is concerned that he is a visual learner and that I mostly teach to auditory learners. Joel has a 55% in the course, and he's concerned because his learning style is inconsistent with my teaching style. So he thinks he will be not successful in the class. Okay, so I have heard this almost every semester, I'm sure. Okay, Poor Joel, what do we do about it? Here's how Dr. Redifer and I encourage you to respond in this situation. The first thing is, this is so special ed teacher of me, but I find it also is very helpful with adult learners. Praise Joel for being proactive and reaching out to you. Okay, so that's the first step. We know that it's unlikely that Joel is failing because of his learning style, but assuming most of the students in your class are receiving, A's and B's, we do know that there is something misaligned with the way you are teaching and the way Joel is learning. He's getting a 55%, right? So he is not getting the material in the way that all of the other students are. So we want to tell Joel, hey, thank you, you're right. There is something going on here that is kind of causing you problems with the alignment between my instruction and your understanding of the instruction. So be kind and tell him thank you for reaching out to me. And then the next thing that we wanted you to do, our second goal for today, is we wanted you to be able to dispel learning style myths for your students, because we just don't want these to have the stranglehold that they do on our students. And so we do want you to kind of point out that Joel has learned a lot of skills, right? Joel, you have learned a lot of things, not necessarily in other modalities. So you don't learn to play basketball just by watching people play basketball, right? If that was the case, I'd be a great golfer. Put me out on the links and I'm gonna lose my $10 back to you guys. So there are just different things. Joel, you've learned things through other modalities, you're cool. So we wanna make sure that we dispel that for him. And then I think that this is helpful, which is reassure Joel that you will teach in the modality most appropriate for the content. I often find that if you tell a student like, hey, this is the time that that is very lecture based because it's new vocabulary heavy, right? So you need to learn this new vocabulary before you can learn about applying it in hands-on. But we will get to apply it in hands-on. So kind of explain why you're doing what you're doing. And a lot of times I think Joel can be like, oh, okay, I see. You don't necessarily have to do that for all your students, but like we said, Joel has reached out to you to say, hey, I'm struggling. So you can kind of explain your process back to Joel. And then the most important part is now to actually problem solve with Joel why he is getting a 55%. Okay, so don't just tell Joel learning styles aren't, Dr. Noel and Dr. Redifer say learning styles aren't real. I'm teaching in a variety of contexts. You should be fine, right? Don't leave it there. Let's figure out what's going on with Joel. What do we need to do? So some things are his assignments late, right? If his assignments are late, maybe you need to work with him on coming up with, a planner and a schedule of when he's going to turn things in. These are common things for me, right? Other ones might be reading comprehension. And so Joel might, once I start to give some of that college level reading, Joel might be having a hard time, right? So I'd have the questions of how long are you spending on your reading? What are you getting from it? Other things are that I find a lot are if somebody's struggling with written expression. So sometimes I can have a conversation with somebody in class and be like, they get this content. Perfect, great. Write a paper for me. I read their paper and I'm like, you don't get this content, right? And what's happening is there's a misalignment between what they know and how they express what they know, right? So what we encourage you to do, instead of just saying learning styles are not real, don't worry about it, we got you covered, sit down, get into the nitty gritty and figure out what Joel needs. So here are some things that I have used that I find very helpful. So Center for Literacy could help with the reading comprehension. The Writing Center can help with written expression. If there might be something else, we know the Student Accessibility Resource Center can be helpful. And at this point, I would actually love to encourage anybody who has used some of our campus resources or other resources to go ahead and put them in the chat box, and maybe we can all kind of learn from each other about things that we have found to be helpful.
Or feel free to unmute yourself if you'd rather just say the resource.
Yeah, or chat. I love to hear people. Oh, Counseling Center. Oh, exactly right. Perfect. Counseling Center. Dr. Blanchard said that one. All right.
So feel free to continue thinking of resources that you think might be useful to others here, because we don't always know how many, of us have heard of resources that maybe some of us use all the time. So for example, I recently discovered some videos that our library website has about how to access particular databases for students. And that was really helpful when I was assigning a research paper, that I could give them this video and say, look, this is exactly how you get to the database that I want you to use. So until I did that assignment, I didn't know those videos existed. Okay, so the next myth is a pretty timely one that we are probably all hearing a lot right now. And this is that students believe that they, as an individual, cannot learn well online. And so this belief is often based on their past experience in online courses, but it's not an individual difference. There isn't some student that has a ability to either learn or not learn online, just like we know there aren't actual styles of learning that make you unable to learn in another modality. So what we do know about online learning is that students' past experiences in their classes influence their perception of their ability to learn in this format. So they may look back on a class that, let's say they took biochemistry online, and maybe they think, oh, I'm not good at biochemistry, but they may also think, oh, I'm not good at online learning based on their experience in that particular class. What we know from the science of learning is that no one has an unchangeable ability to either learn or not learn in a particular format or style. So this would apply to learning styles. It would also apply to this idea of online learning. There are not people who just aren't able to learn online. Now, due to an assignment that I gave this semester to my students, I recently learned a lot about how students think that their learning style, which we know is a myth, actually impacts whether or not they can learn in online classes. So this is really unfortunate, because this myth is kind of snowballing at this point when a lot of us are teaching online, that before they've even taken an online class, some students are thinking that they're not going to do well in it because of their learning style. And so this is a real problem in a semester when a lot of us are teaching online. So here's Peter. Peter signed up for your online class, and your class hasn't started yet, but he says, hey, I don't do well in online courses, but your class got switched to online, so I'm stuck with it, and I never learn in this modality. So what can you do when a student, before you've even ever met them, feels like they're not going to be able to learn in your class? Well, like Dr. Noel said, you can problem solve. So what exactly is going on? What is the student concerned about? Are they concerned about time management? Are they concerned about their internet connectivity? Are they just confused, or they don't really have any kind of pre-existing knowledge, and so they don't know how it's going to go? Or have they just heard bad things from other students? So some of those things you might be able to help him alleviate by making it clear that you're going to have an organized schedule, and that it will be very clear when things are due, that there's a place they can go if they have questions, what's in the syllabus and what might be somewhere else on your course site. You can also, once the class starts, provide opportunities for engagement and participation. So one reason that students think they're not good at online classes often is they have decided, or they believe that they are a kinesthetic learner. They think that they have to learn by doing. Well, we all learn by doing. So it's a good thing to be engaging your students so that you're not just sitting there lecturing and they're just sitting there doing whatever they're doing on their side of the screen. So if students associate online learning with a lack of interaction, that could be one reason that they feel like they don't do well in online classes. And you can turn that idea on its head by not having that kind of online class. You can also provide clear structure and remind students of due dates. Now, yes, they're adults, and if your due dates are posted somewhere, then they're posted somewhere. But in order to prevent many emails to you about when things are due, you might just be a little proactive and remind them of the big ones. And if there are big assignments that are important, hopefully you're discussing them in class regularly too, so students are getting those reminders during their interaction with you, if you're having a synchronous class, or even if you're having an asynchronous class and you're posting videos. One thing that is really frustrating for students is when they can't find things in an online class. And so if they already believe that they're not good at online learning and then they're confused by the class format, this can just perpetuate that low self-efficacy about themselves as an online learner. When you do provide feedback, make sure that it's specific and that it tells them how to improve. Don't ever attribute your own students' challenges to, oh, I know this is hard because we're online. Don't say things like that, because then you just perpetuate this belief that there's something about the format that makes them less able to learn. And don't have an overly complex Blackboard or other course site. Don't have folders within folders within folders within folders, and then that's the only place they can find one thing. In a lot of the kind of online forums for professors that I read, it seems like some people are getting, 10, 20, 30 emails a day from students asking where something is. If 1 or 2 people ask you where something is, maybe they're just not looking in the right place. If 5 or 10 people ask you where something is, it's not clear where something is. So all of these kinds of frustration that are really kind of extraneous to the course content can just further frustrate students and make them believe they're not capable of learning in this format. Other things that just kind of anecdotally I've heard students complain about recently is that all of their assignments are due at 11:59 p.m. on Sundays in every single class. So maybe consider thinking about how you would stagger your assignments in a face-to-face class, and consider if there is, a way you could stagger them similarly so that students can space out and have a more structured week, and so that all their assignments aren't due at the same time, the same day. And CITL, of course, can help you with the design of your Blackboard site if you are concerned that it's too complex, or if you seem to be getting a lot of frustration from students about not being able to find things or not completing assignments because they didn't see them. CITL can help you with that. A related myth, and when we started planning this, we weren't really thinking about this online format. We weren't really thinking so much about online learning, but it just kind of evolved that way because of the situation that we're in and how many of these myths are so relevant right now. So the next myth that we would like to talk to you about is multitasking. This is a word that gets used all the time. And we might think we're multitasking if we're, listening to music while we're grading papers. But if you don't really have to actively focus your attention on the music, then that's not necessarily multitasking. For 2 tasks that do demand our attention, though, we cannot switch back and forth. We cannot attend to both of them at the same time. What we're essentially doing is switching between one and the other, which means at any given moment, you're only paying attention to one of those things and you're not paying attention to the other. Maybe this is okay for some tasks, but what research tells us is that if you try to multitask while doing your homework as a student, it takes you up to 400% longer to complete that homework assignment. So you can talk till you're blue in the face about why students shouldn't multitask during class, but giving them this particular statistic seems to get my students to pay attention, because believe it or not, they don't want to spend 400% longer doing their homework. So we know that it's a struggle not to multitask sometimes, and we're going to talk to you about some multitasking situations and what you might be able to do about those for your students. So here's Sharon. Sharon watches cat videos during class because she thinks that she's good at multitasking and she really enjoys watching videos of cats. She has a C in your course, and she does fine on the reading quizzes, but when you give her assignments that are more from what you did in class and less from the textbook, she doesn't seem to do very well on those assignments. So clearly you've got a student here who thinks it's okay to multitask. And in our current pandemic situation, many of us are going to be teaching to students who are trying to multitask, and we're not even going to necessarily know that that's what they're doing. Oh, what do you do about knitting? I've had students say that having something to do with their hands help them pay attention better. Okay, so if a student is an expert knitter, and it does not require their attention in order to do that knitting behavior, then that's probably less disruptive than if a student was like a brand new knitter and they really needed to pay attention to the knitting. However, if she drops a stitch, that's the extent of my knitting knowledge, that you can drop a stitch. If she drops a stitch and then has to stop and pay attention to that, at that moment, she's not paying attention to what she's doing in class. So I think I would push back on that student and say, you know, I understand that if we're doing something that's, you know, really kind of low involvement, like maybe if I'm showing you a long video and you're just kind of supposed to be watching it, taking it in, maybe you feel like you would like to do knitting during that. But if we're having a discussion and you need to participate, it's just taking your attention away from what we're doing in class. So if I was in a face-to-face class, I would not allow a student to knit during class. Of course, in this online environment, we have a little bit less control over that. Someone did ask about cell phone usage. I'm going to get to that in a second, but I absolutely do not allow phone usage in my class, my face-to-face class. I also don't allow the use of laptops for any reason, unless I tell them to bring a laptop for a specific activity. Good point. Knitting and taking notes seems like it would be difficult. So what you can do about these things. First of all, explicitly point out to your students early in the class that there are huge cognitive benefits, huge memory benefits, and benefits for their own understanding to focusing on one thing at a time. I also encourage you to implement course policies that discourage multitasking. Don't allow phone usage, and actually enforce it. Don't just say you don't allow phones, because even if you just say you don't allow phones, some of them will still get out their phones. And until you actually enforce it and say, oh, please put your phone away, remember we don't allow phones in this class, then they might just test you to see if you're serious or not. You can also do some really quick and easy demonstrations about the ineffectiveness of multitasking. So play a video and ask them questions at the same time. And then afterwards, ask them questions about what was in the video. Just simple things you can do to demonstrate that even though they might feel like they're multitasking, what they're really doing is switching back and forth between the two tasks. And until you show them that demonstration, they may not really notice how poor they are at multitasking. And also think about and point out to them how, at least in a face-to-face class, their multitasking can distract other students. So if everybody has a laptop and Sharon's in the front row watching her cat videos, everybody kind of a panoramic view behind her can see those cat videos and be distracted by them. And so that's disruptive to other people's learning as well. So for studying, students often have troubles with multitasking because they're at home, they're in a more relaxed environment, and this can also apply during classes that are happening in these more relaxed environments. So I often have students who say that, you know, they have trouble with studying, they have trouble staying on task while they're studying, or they just feel like their studying strategies are not very effective. So we could give you a whole nother webinar on effective study strategies, but one thing that I try to help them do with their own studying is to use the same policies in class during their studying. So take your cell phone and put it somewhere out of reach and turn it on silent while you're studying, because that thing is personally relevant to you. You can't ignore it even if you try. So put it somewhere that you don't have to make the decision of whether to pay attention to the phone or pay attention to your textbook.
All right. And I did want to, the cell phone usage, I'm actually curious to hear how you all have addressed that. Maybe that's something that you guys can talk about in your breakout rooms, but both Jenni and I also have a very firm no cell phone policy. I also have a firm no laptop policy. So I print out the notes and bring them for that reason that Jenni talked about, is or if they are allowed to have their laptop for some reason, I'm walking around to see what they're doing. And I actually have never had any pushback about it. Occasionally a student will say, hey, I'd like to have my phone out because my mom is sick or my kid's daycare, or, something like that. So I'm going to have my phone with me, and I might have to answer it. And that's, of course, always fine. But I do think that sometimes professors might feel hesitant to have a strict policy because they're afraid of pushback. And maybe you all have had pushback. I also, kind of have a small group of students, and that tend to just.
I have had a student that just kept on getting the phone out. And so then I just sent the student an email and said, I've reminded you about this. This is a policy, like these are the consequences. So, please keep your phone away. Didn't respond to the email, but also put the phone away. So
good. You should have sent them a text during class.
I do not use my personal cell phone.
Just kidding. Okay. Okay, so what we actually thought would be helpful, so we wanted to kind of share these 3 things that we thought were really important for you to debunk. But then we also know that it's helpful to talk to each other about some of this stuff. And so we are going to put you guys Jenny's going to put you guys in a breakout room, but here's what we want you to think about. So the first one is, which of these myths do you hear about in your classes, or are there other things? Is there something big that Jenny and I did not touch on that you're like, this is causing a lot of problems with my students' ability to learn? And then what are you guys doing to combat some of these myths? How are you addressing it? I think Ren put in the chat box that Dr. Weiniger and Jenny did a presentation one time about multitasking, and then that was helpful. So are there things like that that you guys have done? And so we're going to put you in breakout rooms.
I think we're mostly all back in here. So what did your groups talk? We mostly talked about cell phone use in our group. What did your groups talk about?
Patrice, can I put you on the spot? Do you mind kind of saying some of the ways that you help structure your online class in terms of helping them with time management and things like that? Because you have some really good policies.
Gosh, I don't know what I said now.
Just the idea about the amount of, how you tell them about the amount of time.
Okay, so one thing I want to bring up to everybody, though, is I was really surprised to hear that all professors are like using a same due date time of 11:59 on Sunday.
I don't know that it's all, but I just know it's something that students have been complaining about to me this semester.
Yeah. Well, mine has always been 8 a.m. on Monday, and I just arbitrarily picked that. I could just as easily use Wednesday. I mean, I just thought, I do have students who work, and I know that their work schedule sometimes on weekends. But anyway, that was an interesting point. I, on every single module, so every week it's released at the same time, and I put how many pages each article is out beside the link to that article. And then I put the amount of time every video clip is, whether it's 3 minutes or 90 minutes, so that they can look right there on the very first open page of Blackboard and see how much time each thing takes.
Yeah, I thought that was great. And then the other thing that she talked about was that she keeps it at 6 to 8 hours of work. So she's very consistent. I think that also can sometimes trip our students up if you have, one time one of your weeks is 3 hours, and then the next time you give them like 15 hours worth of stuff to do. So she's very consistent about how much she's expecting them to do every week so they can plan. So do you want to?
Well, yeah, and I always give them a heads up the week before if there's a longer session than expected. Like one module, they have to do an aging simulation experience, and that's an extra thing. And then this week they're doing death and dying, and they have to do a conversation. So last week I made sure that they had heads up about how it would take them an hour and a half longer this week.
Awesome, huh?
Thank
I
you.
think those are
Those are
such good
great.
ideas. I loved my breakout room. All right, who else might want to share?
I have a question about the due dates. My due dates are 11:59 on Sunday night. I had no idea that, but they
No,
have.
none of us did. I mean, this is just something that has just happened because all my students were complaining about it. So I mean, I have no idea how many people are doing.
It seems like it would be better because you would know when everything was due at the same time.
But
And
then
they have
that
a
means
week
they
to
don't
do it.
start working on it until Sunday at 10.
Well,
No, I don't know. But I mean,
For
it would help. I think it helps them. You know, I know that some people's approach to teaching online is that, well, since we're not in the classroom, I'm going to give you like more work to do. And I know probably not the people who showed up to this webinar, but so that seems to be some students' perception of how online classes are. And so if they feel like they have more work and it's all due at the same time, it's really hard for them to have to like build that structure for themselves when previously it had been built for them just by staggered due dates, and some classes, you know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and some classes Tuesday, Thursday.
so how do you work with other faculty to make sure you're not doing that? I don't understand the concept, but how would I reach out to other people and say, you know, what are your due dates?
I mean, I've just stopped. I don't use Sunday 11:59. I use Fridays as the due
Okay.
date, you know, and hopefully if more people hear about this, and if it is actually a real problem, which this is all anecdotal, just the 11:59 thing. The rest of this presentation is not just anecdotal. I hope that people will just think about it and think about, well, would you have done this in your face-to-face class? Would you have had everything, you know, like why has it changed?
Oh, it was the same in my face-to-face class.
So one thing I might recommend, I've known faculty who have asked their students and worked on it, like to determine, hey, when do you want things to be due? I would not do it now. I mean, it's too late for this semester, but starting like first class in January, let's talk about this. Previously, I've had everything due on Sunday at 11:59. Does that work for you? Or what else would you like? And have a conversation about what time works best. And obviously not everybody's going to be happy, you know, but they can vote, and students feel empowered. They feel heard. And so it sets you off in a really nice way that you're being attentive to their needs. For instance, one faculty I know changed her deadlines to Monday at 1 o'clock, which seems very random. But she said she had a student who said, look, I'm a working mom. I type my papers Sunday night. Most times, you know, or I'm doing it over the weekend. I don't have time to edit it. I don't have time to look at it again. And I use my lunch break from 12 to 1 to read back over it before I hit submit. So that's no big deal for the faculty, right? Like, okay. I mean, if it's problematic for you, like if you can't have it on Friday because you don't want to be looking at it all weekend, that's fine. Don't put that as an option. But I think it can really empower the students.
You just
Did you
gave
just call me out for
idea.
grading on the weekend?
You just gave me an idea that I have struggled. I have 50 students. So when I have an essay that's due, I almost puke the first 3 days because I'm just grading essays. And so it's been a problem for me. I wonder if it would work to have to offer the very first week of class, to offer 2 separate due dates for information, Wednesday or Monday, and let them choose. And then one of the CITL people tell me, I think I could group them into 2 different groups so that they picked what day of the week it was good for them, and maybe they would get it in on time better. Because
As long as it didn't cause confusion or people to say, oh, I thought you said, you know, as long as it was like after that decision time, it was like posted somewhere so they couldn't like say, oh, I thought, or genuinely be confused.
Or if you don't care, like if you don't care if people turn it in on Monday or Wednesday, I mean, I mean, some of these things are really personal preference things. One of us is like, absolutely not. And others are like, no big deal.
I have heard this, a student,
Audrey?
not my class, but just he dropped a class in the end because that was the only online class he had, but it's that the professor gave him like 3 homework on Monday and then due on Saturday. It's always a week. And then he always thought, oh, I have plenty of time to do it. And then by Friday, it's like, oh, I don't have time to do it. So in the end, he dropped it because, yes, every week is like this, and then it's just a lot. And I think if it's face-to-face class, we don't do this. Just give you 3 assignments and due on the end of the week like that. We kind of stagger them, and that will help them to do time management better than just every week it's the same. And that was the only class in the end he decided to drop because he just couldn't do the time management by himself to do that.
I think, yeah, I feel like I've heard a lot of a similar type of story. And we talked to Patrice, and Jenny and I kind of all talked about maybe if professors made front loading videos if you're going to put all of your content out, say on Monday, make a video explaining what the content is and how long it's going to take. And like the expectation is students, you just have to watch this 3-minute video of me talking on Monday. And then from there, you can plan your week, right? So then if you know that you have 6 hours in Dr. Noel's class, that's going to culminate in a paper. You're not good at writing papers, so that might take you 8 hours, like whatever. That might
But
be.
I want us to tell them that they aren't not good at writing papers, that they just need to develop some strategies.
Right. Yeah, you just might need more time. Sure, for sure.
Audrey, sorry, go ahead, Christina.
Oh yeah, no, that was just something that in my different discussions about this topic that I thought could be helpful. Robin, were you going to say something?
I have a question. I have probably 4 students this semester, mainly freshmen, who just stopped coming to my Zoom class. Of course, it is at 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning, but a lot of them are in bed. But anyway, they just stopped coming, and I was very concerned, and I reached out to them, sent them emails and said, are you all right? Are you sick? What can I do to help you? Didn't hear, talked to my department head. He said, try to contact them again. And the bottom line is, when they answered me, they said, oh, I'm a visual learner, and I just can't do this. I just can't do this. I'm going to drop out after this semester until school is normal again and come back. And,
please.
And then they said, this one particular girl said, can you help me pass this class now? Well, she had stopped coming, period. And so I went back to my department head and said, what can I do? Anything can I do to help her now? And he said, no, she stopped coming to class. So, and I did this early in the semester. It wasn't like just now I started saying, what can we do? So what can we do?
I know.
Do you have any suggestions?
I know some people have been, and I have too, been more flexible with deadlines this semester than they typically would. From personal experience, when a student reaches out late in the semester and hasn't done any work all semester and says, I want to make it up, they usually don't actually end up following through. So maybe once in a while they do, but I mean, that's kind of your prerogative if you want to allow someone to do that at this point. I do feel kind of bad that a student was like, can I still pass? And the department head was just like, no, go away because you didn't come to class. I mean, I don't really like that, but
well, it wasn't just that they didn't come, like weekly assignments. They were so far behind, I'd have to go back and teach them personally.
Right.
You know?
So for a class like what you teach, that seems like maybe not very, very feasible. But I mean, I think that showing them up front, like here are some strategies to succeed in a class where you have to be a little more independent, or here is some ways that you could structure your week. I mean, I tell my students, like, get up, get dressed, go do your work in the quietest place you can, and set aside a time. I will do this for 2 hours. And then after you're done with the 2 hours, give yourself some kind of a reward for doing it. And then let yourself have a break. Don't just like cram all your work into Saturday and Sunday because everything's due Sunday at 11.
So it sounds like I need to have a class at the beginning that talks about how to discipline your time periods and how to discipline your work ethic, basically. And I already feel that I talked to them about work ethic and how important work ethic is, that like I am their client and they are working for me. And if they don't turn in their assignments, they get fired, basically. You know, I actually give that illustration.
Doing more than
Can I jump in?
Yes, Audrey, yes.
Thank you.
I actually am very sympathetic. I'm so sorry. I'm on a phone and I can't see people's names and I need to see all the participants. And I don't know who's just talking. Who's just talking?
That was Gloria.
Gloria. Gloria, I'm sympathetic to you. And you said this in the presentation, I think, Jenny. I think it was you. I apologize if it wasn't.
That's okay.
But like, you don't want to perpetuate myths and enable bad behavior. So if you have already told them at the beginning that, you know, hey, I see that you're not doing well. Are you okay? And they ghost you, I don't have this problem because the next email I send is not as nice. So the first email I send is like, are you needing anything? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And if they ghost you, then the second email says, I haven't heard from you and I'm starting to get concerned and you got to know you're going to fail, right? So and I say things like, I don't want to fail you. Help me help you, but make it really clear. I mean, I don't think that Gloria is already doing, in my opinion, more than any student deserves. I think she's a rock star. I don't think that we have time, and I don't think we should be people's personal life coaches and their teachers. So my suggestion to Gloria would just be like to gradually amp up the intensity as you're doing it. And then at that point, if they don't come, that is not your fault. And just so you know, in my experience, I can get real sharp with my kids. They always show up after they realize I'm serious. Like I've never had, I have 100 students this semester. Only 5 of them are graduate students. 95, I have an online class where we meet and each section is like 45 kids and I might be missing 5 once a week. So, I mean, it's really about like, I think that I'm sorry to any men who are here. I don't even know if there are any, but I think women teachers don't get taken as seriously unless we act like we take ourselves seriously. So I support Gloria. I don't think that you can reteach a kid an entire semester's worth. And it's not fair. It's not fair to you. I wouldn't do it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I have a question. I'm not sure if it's a question or a concern, because I kind of see what Audrey's saying as well. I teach the dreaded math class that all students hate. They just hate math. And I am so overhearing, you know, I just can't learn this way. I just can't learn this way. And I'm like, you guys, if you were face to face with me, you'd come to class, you'd listen to the lecture, maybe you'd take good notes, maybe you won't. Then you'd go home and then you complain. I remember when you were there, when I was there with you, but now I don't. So I have gone through and I have created, I kid you not, with every class that I teach, and Audrey, I have close to 200 students this semester.
Good. God love you.
Yeah, I have created 30-minute videos for every section as if I am face-to-face, that they can stop, rewind.
Yes,
me
too.
I have notes that are blank.
Me too.
I have completed notes. All of it is posted, and they're still not doing the work. I have deadlines that are floating deadlines that says, you know what, you didn't finish the work on time. That's okay. You can still log in and get an automatic 5% penalty because you did not do it on time. I don't take it per day. It's just 5%, period. That includes exams, 10% for not completing it on time. When I open an exam, they have 4 days to finish it. They have 2.5 hours per exam. If they take the first 2 days, they have an incentive that they get to take it again before the exam closes, and I will take the best score. They're still not doing it. I don't know what more I can do.
Maybe you're doing too much.
And then what do we do when the university, and this is probably a whole new subject, Micah, going into a whole new thing. What do we do when the university perpetuates this and says, oh, now let's change the drop date to December the 4th, 2 days before finals begin, that says we're not going to hold you accountable anyway, just going to drop the class. I'm wondering, is the next email we're going to get is going to be the pass fail again? At some point, when are we going to hold these kids responsible? I mean, we have to stop saying get back to normal. Normal is relative. This is normal. Let's move on. Let's learn how to deal with it. Because if you're out in the real world, you're not going to keep a job for long if you can't meet deadlines. I don't know what more we can do. I mean, I understand, Jenny. Am I doing too much? I don't know.
Let me, there's somebody I know who has been really, really working super, super hard to make his online classes as close as possible to what he would do in person, and making so many videos and putting up so much stuff. And just most people would consider this person a rock star teacher. And I happened to run into one of his students outside of school. And she said, oh, he makes me anxious. I can't even log into the class because there's so much stuff. There's just so much stuff to look at. I don't even know where to begin. And so you're doing so much, and you're making your classes like 10 times harder for yourself. But what's the, like, go back and look at your grade distribution from before and now. Like, do you see that big of a difference? Like, do all these things really help? I don't know, maybe they do, and I'm sure they help some students, but maybe other students are like, oh, there's this late thing, I don't have to worry about doing it on time, and they push it off and push it off and push it off because they don't see any of the deadlines as real. And of course there's going to be individual differences. Some students are going to meet the regular deadline most of the time and be grateful for that late, once every 10 times, but other ones are just going to go, oh, it's not a real deadline, so I don't have to worry about it. And then they get way too behind. I mean, it's hard. Like, we can't perfectly do everything for every single student in every single possible scenario they could be dealing with. We can't.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. And see, I went back and I looked at, how did I end the spring semester? And one of the biggest comments from students was, during the Zoom meetings, they wish I had recorded it so they could go back and watch what I did. So that's what I did this semester. Now, me personally, I think my grades are better this semester, but I also have the other end where I have a larger number of students that are just not being successful. But to be honest with you, ladies, and there's Steve, sorry, Steve, to be honest with you, on a typical semester, I have 4 classes. Don't faint. I have 7 classes this semester. So yes, don't faint. Okay. Yeah. 7 classes I'm covering this semester. So, I mean, I have a massive overload that, I mean, I don't know,
what can I do to help? That nobody should do that by themselves. Nobody.
I'm just ready for the semester to end. I'm just ready for it to end. I mean, I want them to succeed. I don't know what else I can do. I'm trying to be sympathetic about if they say they have COVID, and I'm like, okay, fine, I'm giving you an extension, but you're still not doing the work. I don't know what else I can. I mean, I've told them, it's open notes. You can print the notes and take the test. I'm telling you what you can do. And they just don't care. They just don't care. I don't know what it is.
Okay, let me say something else that's relative to this. We know that depression and anxiety rates are up.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that impacts people's ability to make themselves sit down and do their work, especially when they don't have the same accountability feeling that they would if they had to sit in a room with you and have you look them in the eye and know that they didn't do their work. So you can't put all of this on you, okay? A student who's not doing their work in your class isn't necessarily, I mean, maybe they're doing their work for some other classes, but maybe they're not. You don't know. Yeah, so
probably not.
I was telling someone else this who was complaining about this the other day. Look, student performance is a regression analysis, okay? The outcome is their performance, but there are many variables that go into that multiple regression. Hey, you teach math, so you know what a regression is.
Yeah.
There's multiple variables in that regression analysis besides just the teacher quality or things like that. And right now we have maybe like more covariates in that regression and some moderators and stuff that we wouldn't normally have. So you just, I mean, you do the best you can do. You use strategies that align with the science of learning. You have some grace, you try to engage them, and then you're not like a superhero. We're not.
Yeah.
I have some ideas. I don't know if they're things you already do. But for one thing I do is I actually have a folder on my Blackboard that's just called helpful information. And so anything that is not required goes there. And so, so it kind of like filters out all the stuff that's like reminders and, this is how to take notes and all that. And I mean, maybe that won't work for you. But also, I don't know if this works for other people, but I tell my students, I tell them up front, because I have so many, I will always have plenty of grading, right? Kind of like what Patrice said. I tell them if they email me a minute before the deadline and tell me they need more time, I will give them more time. I just won't give them more time after. Like if they blow off an assignment and then a month later are like, I want to do it now. It's like, no, I never let kids do that. But if they ask me before the deadline, I don't even care if the reason is I'm stupid and I didn't do it. like the answer is granted, yes. And it's like, it changed a lot because I've noticed it doesn't really hurt my grading a lot, honestly, because I've got plenty to do. And the grades are better. And you all know it's so much easier to grade good work than it is to grade work with errors.
Yeah.
So it's easier for you to just wait a few days and get something better. And my grades are actually the same as they were before. I do want to say one thing that WKU is doing really great. And I want to give you guys just like a counter example to something. My husband teaches at Austin P down in Clarksville. And Austin P this year decided they were going to force all of their faculty to not have an attendance policy whatsoever. And the students know this. And my husband routinely has classes where he's sitting there in Zoom in the void and not a single kid shows up. So the idea that if they think they don't have to come, they don't have to come, like they're proving it. So I think that if you guys are getting anybody to come, you're doing something right. Pat yourself on the back because as soon as they know they don't have to come, they don't. So, I mean, you guys are probably, I mean, we're preaching in the choir here. These are probably the people that try really hard to be good teachers.
So I know we're over time a little. And for those who are still here, I do want to just kind of show you our takeaways so we can capitalize on primacy and recency effects and make sure we leave you with something that you feel like is kind of useful. So just remember that your students may arrive with misconceptions about their learning and their abilities. We know that tons of people believe these misconceptions. They're out there, they're continuing to be perpetuated. And it's not about arguing with them and just telling them like, no, you're wrong. What you want to do is show them that these beliefs aren't helpful to their learning, and that, you know, whether or not they've been told that they're this kind of learner or that kind of learner before, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're going to teach your class, you're going to teach your content in the way that is best for facilitating learning that content. So if you're teaching basketball, you're going to be teaching it in a hands-on way. And if you're teaching music, you're going to be teaching them to listen for particular notes. I'm not a musician. So that they don't need to worry about those kinds of things, because you are always going to teach your class, you know, you're going to measure their learning in a variety of ways, and you're going to teach your class in the way that best facilitates learning that content. And you know what that is because you're an expert in the content. We also want to remind them that regardless of their past experiences in an online class, not all online classes are the same, and they absolutely can be successful in an online class, and you can make them feel more confident in their ability to be successful in your class if it's very clear to them what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, and why they're doing it. Why should they care about it? Why does it matter? And when you measure their learning, you want to measure it often and in a variety of ways, so that if you just only have a midterm and a final and they screw up the midterm, they're going to feel like it's hopeless and there's no way for them to pass. So if you, aside from the mathematical reasons why we want to measure learning lots of times and in different ways, if you do things like have only 1 or 2 assignments and they're very high stakes, then when students do poorly, they may revert back to, oh, this is because I'm this kind of a learner, or this is because I can't, you know, learn in this online format. And so we don't want to do things in our classes that further make students rely on those myths. So do things that show them that no matter what they thought about themselves coming in, they are capable of succeeding. And you're giving them lots of different ways to show how they can succeed in your class. And just in case you're interested, here are some references on some of the topics that we've talked about today. I highly recommend, if you don't look at any other ones on this list, looking at the second one, the Neuromythologies in Education article, because it just outlines a lot of different myths that people believe. I mean, it's more of a review article, so it's pretty easy to read. And what kind of where these ideas came from and how they can be harmful to learning. So if you have colleagues who believe these myths or family members, you could show them that article and maybe they'll read it. Any other kind of questions or last things you want to say, Christina?
No, I'm good. I think Micah is going to put together a list of resources for you guys. And Micah, do you want to tell us your next steps?
Certainly, I will get the Zoom link together and we'll send that out to you. So if you'd like to watch our conversation again, you're welcome to. And I'll send those resources as well. So I will hopefully do that in the next day.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Micah,
everybody,
I
for
have a
being here.
question. Micah, I have a question if you would
Yes.
stay on just a minute after
Sure,
everybody.
of course.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
here, everybody.
Wonderful
Thank you,
presentation.
Christina and Jenny. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
showing up.
I learned a lot. This is like reading my mind about the mist. Thank you so much.